Hey there, I'm Axel Beast, and I got something other than a mailbag video for you again. Today I would like to talk about 3D dot game heroes. And if you don't know what that is, you can check the description because it's might be a little hard to explain. But if you're too lazy, no offense, to check the description, the gist is that 3D dot game heroes is a game. It's going to be on the Sony PlayStation 3. And it's basically, despite 3D graphics, the gameplay is almost identical, to be fair, to the original Legend of Zelda. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding this because fanboys, not to use that term offensively, and just, hey, that's what they are, have been upset about this game because they consider it a ripoff. And they think it's dishonorable of Sony to rip off Nintendo and to rip off the Zelda series, and it's a shameless crap game, is what the kind of things I've heard. I would like to say some of my thoughts on it, and bear in mind that they may not be popular, especially if you are one of the aforementioned people. So, basically, first point I hear that annoys me, yes, this is a subject that annoys me, believe it or not, is people saying, oh, this is Sony this, Sony that, blah, 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 blah. Regardless of what the following argument is, it's kind of irrelevant at that point just because you say Sony. Yes, this game is on a Sony console. However, one thing you have to bear in mind is it is a third-party game. Sony did not make it. Yes, it is true that they did allow it on their console. However, Nintendo does the same thing, and frankly, there's almost no chance a video game company would not allow a game on their system. It just doesn't happen in the industry, and if it did, it's a surefire way to get in trouble, really, because you're going to lose people making games on your system. So, you can't blame Sony for that, and they're not responsible for the game. I forget who the developer was, but it wasn't Sony. I know that. It wasn't even a second-party game where Sony would have hired a developer to do the game for them. It was quite literally a third-party game where they just hey, let's make this game. Oh, let's try to put it on a Sony console, etc. Let's see. The second point I tend to hear is that it's a ripoff, that it's a blatant ripoff, and it's just horrible. Well, I think people are using the term ripoff a little too liberally in this situation. Because you got to realize there's a heavy distinction between copying, ripping off, paying tribute to, borrowing from. These are all very different things, and it's not a fine line between them. It's a distinct line. What I believe 3D dot game heroes to be is a tribute. I believe they took from this old, famous, successful, frankly amazing video game series, and I only take that back if you're not a Zelda fan. But we're all Zelda fans, aren't we? They borrowed from the series, and they were trying to pay tribute to it. They were trying to say, this series is awesome. Here's a tribute to the original game just so you can have a little more of that. Because frankly, none of the games have emulated exactly what the original Legend of Zelda did. Even A Link to the Past, arguably the most similar, was a very different game. It did not have a lot of the same features of the blind exploration. And that's what 3D dot game heroes is. Now, that's kind of a hard thing to argue with. However, there is a fact that the creators of 3D dot game heroes, the developers, have constantly called it a tribute, a homage to the original Legend of Zelda. In the trailer, they say something along the lines of the greatest retro love letter of all time. Basically, that implies it's honor or a tribute. I mean, indirectly, but that's the only thing that could mean it's kind of creepy out of that context. I mean, what the hell else could they have been talking about? Another thing is that the whole way the game is done, if it is a ripoff, it's shameless. I don't think if someone was trying to rip something off, they would make it this obvious. That is a stupid move, and it would incur the kind of wrath you're seeing from fans, and they would know this. Now, another argument I hear is that the game is just going to be bad. It's going to try to copy Zelda, and it's going to be nothing compared to Zelda. Maybe that's true, but I don't see why someone wouldn't want to play a game that is just like The Legend of Zelda if they're a fan of The Legend of Zelda. It's just more Zelda, even if it's not made by Zelda, its creators. I also hear people saying that Nintendo should sue them, or they can't get away with this. There's actually nothing Nintendo can do. Everything about the game avoids copyrights and trademarks. If Nintendo were to sue them, they would lose, and it would be a bad venture for them. There would be no point in doing it. So, there's no copyrights being violated here. There's no legal issue. Maybe moral, if you believe that, but I believe I've proven by this point that that's not exactly the case. And other things I hear is people who are like just recently finding out about the game. Maybe not all of them have. I don't know these people, so I can't necessarily vouch for them. But I hear some people who I believe to have just found out about the game saying, "Oh, it's just like Zelda. Oh, this is just a ripoff and stuff," following what people say. But I'll be honest with you. Before this whole controversy started, I had actually heard about the game, and I was learning about it some. The game does have striking, exact similarities to The Legend of Zelda. And the fact is that it does borrow a lot off the gameplay, off the Zelda games, both in gameplay and in story and in concept. But there's another thing, is there are actually several unique features in the game. First among them is the fact that the entire game is 3D, but composed out of Lego-like blocks that basically are designed to in a 3D plane, represent like 8-bit graphics. And you can build your own character. There's no real advantage to this. You just get to make whatever character you want. It could be Link if you want. The second thing is the upgrade system. You might see in the trailers how you have this gigantic sword you're swinging around. Well, that's not what you start with. You start with a normal sword, and you can upgrade it by paying for it, and you can upgrade to all kinds of different blades, among which the strongest is basically the gigantic sword. I've also, to what I understand, there are other weapons like axes and spears and lightsabers, even, from what I heard. That sounds funny. There's also lots of mini-games. And I know what you're going to say. That's just like Zelda. But the fact is the mini-games are not like those you find in Zelda. You have a tower defense mini-game. You just have things you don't exactly see in Zelda. Maybe some of them will be things you see in Zelda. There's another point there, is that yes, minigames are a Zelda thing. They are not the original Legend of Zelda thing. There were no minigames in the original Legend of Zelda, really, unless you count the I don't know what you call it, where you shuffle around a bunch of bowls and one of them's got something under it. It was basically like that. That was the only minigame. Another thing is people get upset, like, okay, they're saying it's a ripoff, and then they see that sword and they say, "Oh, that looks stupid. That's nothing like Zelda." Isn't that a little hypocritical? Because you're saying you're upset about the game for being too much of a ripoff, too similar, but then you're upset about the one thing that seems to be unique about it. I mean, yeah, there's the argument it looks stupid, it's bad, but it's still a little hypocritical. I kind of feel like you should be complaining about one or the other, not both at once. That's just me. And another thing is that I guess I'm out. I thought there was something else. Let me think a minute. Well, I think you get my point by now. I just think that the game deserves a little more love than it's getting, and I think that people are just jumping on it without really thinking about it. Note that this is all just my opinion, and I am for the game. I like it. I think it's going to be cool. And this is just how I feel. I think it deserves a little more than it's getting. I heard that the game was made by a team that has worked with Nintendo on the Trauma Center games, but I don't have confirmation of that, so I recommend you look that up yourself. If that's true, that just kind of proves my point a little more. But I guess that's all I got. So, see you next time, guys. Remember, this is just my opinion. Be sure to post in the comments and say what you think, because the point of this is for discussion. Alright, guys, later.